Hey there, Taylor Elwood here, and welcome to the Sacred Masculine podcast, where we're talking about today the topic of how to handle your own anger. So last week I talked about how to handle someone else's anger and really how to be present with it and how to recognize when someone else's anger is abusive or unhealthy versus healthy. And I thought this week I would talk about how to handle our own anger, because the reality is we all have anger. We all experience anger. But in our culture, what we've been taught is to push down that anger, that feeling of anger, to push down that sense of rage, at least, well, I'm going to speak to my own experience here. I'm not going to speak to your experience, but here's what my experience is. As a kid, I learned that it was not healthy or safe for me to express my anger. I learned that I was supposed to keep my emotions in general to myself. I wasn't allowed to cry. I wasn't allowed to express myself. I wasn't allowed to share my anger or my rage. I learned to push my anger and rage down. I learned to turn it inward. And as a result, I ended up getting depressed. And I also became a champion at beating myself up with my own anger. And even to this day, I still struggle with that experience. It's not always that way, but nonetheless, I've had that experience. I've also found that my other challenges around anger is that in the rare event that it gets directed outward, it scares the living fuck out of me to express it to somebody else because I'm afraid that I will drive them away. Also, it can be explosive at times. My dad's anger was like a volcano. He would just go off and it would be like a huge blow up. And then afterwards, everything would kind of be all as well. I've experienced that I can have similar anger issues, or that I'll feel anger towards somebody else, but I won't say anything. I'll get passive aggressive. And these aren't things that I really want for myself. So I'm realizing that my what I've come to realize about anger, and I shared this in my previous video and I'll share it again, is that anger is a very healthy emotion. It's a very important emotion to feel, but how we express it and how we share it is not always healthy. If I am going and I am, for example, being physically abusive, I'm breaking something, or I am potentially touching someone physically in a harmful way because I'm angry, that's abusive. But that's physical abuse. Anger can come out in other ways. So if I am being critical and cruel to somebody in a way that is like where I'm attacking their identity and who they are, that's also a form of abuse. That's emotional and mental abuse. Anger can also show up in the form of like somebody trying to gaslight somebody else, manipulate them to some degree. Because a lot of times, if we're trying to manipulate somebody, we're trying to manipulate them to get something that we want. But also it can be a form of I'm going to mess with you. I'm going to screw around with you and fuck you over. So we have to really look at our own experiences around anger and recognize that a lot of times too that anger is a bid to connect. If I am angry, it is because I want to connect with you and I am feeling disconnected and I am trying to find a way to connect to you. And I've gotten to the point where I feel like I have to express that in the form of anger. Well, if I have to express and if I have to express it in the form of anger, it's probably because there are things that I have not said that I need to be saying. When I look at anger as an experience, what I see a lot of the times, and this is what I've observed with other people, but also my own experience, is that anger is really kind of the expression of resentment. So if I'm angry about something, it's because I haven't expressed it. I haven't said something to someone. And because I haven't said something to someone, I have essentially put myself into a situation where I feel powerless. I get angry and I express that anger outward I express that anger in order to as a bid to connect, but also as a bid to get a sense of agency and power back that I don't feel like I have. So how do we handle anger? The best advice that I have for handling anger is, first of all, to own the fact that you feel angry, and to own the fact that anger can be a healthy emotion and experience. Look, there's nothing wrong with feeling anger. And I think for men, we have been taught that it is probably that anger is probably the safest emotion to feel. And yet I think that for a lot of men, even now, anger is still doesn't feel like a very safe emotion to feel. I certainly don't feel like anger is a safe emotion to feel a lot of the time. And yet what I've learned is that if I don't express my anger comes out sideways. It hurts the relationships that I'm in. It hurts me. And if it does come out in a way that feels uncontrollable, then it can be really scary for the other person. So how do we navigate our own anger? How do we handle that? The first thing to consider too, and this is important, as I kind of alluded to this in the last video, but I'm going to talk about it further, is that also a lot of times when we're dealing with anger, we're not just dealing with anger in the specific moment and with a specific person. We're dealing with anger over a series of moments, a series of experiences, and we could be projecting that anger onto the situation that we're in because that situation reminds us of trauma that we are holding on to from the past. And I'll use myself as an example. I When I get angry, I a lot of times would have to say that my anger is in part a response to past experiences with my dad and my stepmom in particular. These are people who had a lot of power in my life and they made me feel powerless, and I could not at the time respond in a way that allowed me to feel empowered. And I have found that when I look at situations in my life, that the people that I've been attracted to have typically reminded me of those people. And so here I am in these relationships where there's kind of there's me trying to work through an emotional traumatic pattern slash trauma bond. And what's happening is that's infecting the relationship and hurting the relationship. I am not fully engaging with the person as they are. I am engaging with my shadow and with my projection around that person. And that's not to say that the person hasn't done something that has made me feel angry, because legitimately we wouldn't be feeling anger if something wasn't happening in the present moment. But what we have to do is learn to separate out the present moment from the past moments and say, okay, how much of this is the past and how much of this is the present? This also doesn't help that if we have not expressed anger toward the person that we're in relationship with at the time, and they have done stuff in the past that has made us angry, but we haven't expressed it in a healthy way, then we're dealing with all of that too. Well, you said so at such and such 6 months ago. Okay, well, that was 6 months ago. Why didn't you say anything then? Because I felt powerless, because I felt afraid, because I thought you were going to leave me, because of all these other things. Like these are things that can go through a person's head, and yet we're not expressing them. Ideally, what we're doing is we're learning to express anger in the moment, and we're not holding on to it. Because if I hold on to anger, then I am basically cultivating resentment. And if I'm cultivating resentment, then I will undermine the relationship that I'm in. And I say this as someone who has done that. Like, I have relationships where my part of it, the part that I'm responsible for, is that I have not always expressed myself in a way that has been clear or transparent or authentic and honest. And it has harmed that relationship. That's not to say that the other person didn't have their own baggage or stuff. They certainly did. But I'm not tired, but this isn't about them. This is about my handling of my own anger. And so if you look at your own anger and look at it, one of the tough questions you have to ask yourself is, have I expressed this anger in a healthy manner? And what would a healthy manner even look like, you might wonder? Well, it's not raising your voice necessarily. It's not yelling at somebody. It's not throwing a temper tantrum. It's not breaking something or hitting somebody or doing something else along those lines. Healthy anger is Hmm. Healthy anger is the expression of is being able to say, hey, such and such happened. I'm feeling some anger about it because X, Y, and Z happened. You could express that anger in a calm and firm tone of voice. You could have your voice a bit raised. You might need to go for a walk to process. You might need to do something else. One thing I've found that has been helpful for me, both in dealing with other people's anger and in handling my own, is to do physical exercise. If I'm doing push-ups, it is very hard for me to do anything else in that moment other than express myself in a calm manner because I'm already putting a lot of energy into those push-ups. So the anger that I might be feeling, it's going into something that's actually productive for myself. I'm getting in better shape, and it's something that is going to still be helpful for me in terms of the overall experience that I have. So when we look at anger as an experience, it's really important to sit with that and recognize that, okay, I might be feeling angry in this moment, and I can find a way to healthily express it where it doesn't hurt somebody. Like there may be some hurt. Let's just be honest here. If I say that I'm angry with you because you did X, Y, and Z, you crossed the boundary in a certain way, I can't control your reaction. And you might be like, but I didn't mean to. I get it. And what I would really like is if you could hold space with my anger. And at the same time, I would like to be better at holding space with your anger. Like if you're angry at me, I want to be able to hold space with that and hear it. I want to be able to be, and I'll say this is something that I've been working on. I would say in the last like year or so, I got better in some ways with when someone expressed anger at me. The relationship that I was in, I got better at it because there were times that the person I was with was expressing anger, and it wasn't always anger toward me. Sometimes it was anger toward other things, but it came out in a way where here I am in this environment, and this person is talking or is expressing their upsetness, sometimes appropriately, sometimes perhaps not so much, and I was able to handle it. The one question that I came away with, and that I've kind of considered since then, is how much of that should I have continued to handle when it became clear that in some cases it was not a healthy expression of anger. That it was something that I could constitute as this is potentially triggering me, and it could come off as abusive or traumatizing. And my own experience of anger could do the same thing for this person. Like me expressing my anger potentially could. And this is an interesting tightrope that we walk. I mean, on the one hand, it's kind of like, okay, look, each person's going to have their emotional experience, and it's important to make space for that experience. And on the other hand, there's also something to be said for saying, and I also need to feel safe, or I need to know that there is a way for me to feel safe. I need to know that if you're expressing anger, that we can still come to a place where afterwards we can find a sense of shared safety. And I think that this is kind of the human condition of, okay, you're angry, I'm angry, and what does that really mean? How do we handle that? One of the suggestions that I would offer to anyone is allow yourself to honor and recognize the anger that you feel and give yourself space with it. Something I've started doing recently is that if I feel anger, I might say, give me a week and I will come back to you. Now, won't necessarily take a week, but what it means is that I need to take a bit of time to process this, figure out what's really going on. I might discuss it with a couple other people and get their thought, and then come back to you and be like, here's what I'm really feeling. Here's what's going on. This, in my mind, is how the mature man handles their anger. He doesn't just lash out and react. He doesn't act like an infant or throw a temper tantrum. He takes a deep breath. He sits and is present with that anger, and then he asks himself, what is the outcome? What is it I'm really trying to get across here? What is it I want out of this situation? And that's really important, because what you want out of a situation is not necessarily going to be the same thing as what you're going to get. But if we want to experience, if we want to work through the experiences that we're having, we have to learn how to be present with our anger. And this is a skill that all of us need to continually work at. I mean, it's a skill I'm continuing to work at. I am by no means a master at handling my anger. I have learned a lot about handling it. I've learned a lot about being present with it and expressing it in healthier ways, and I still have a ways to go. And that's okay. What's not okay is if we allow our feeling of anger to take over and we end up harming someone through our expression of it. It's okay to feel anger. It's okay to express it. It is not okay to harm someone. So if I go and I throw a punch at someone, for example, out of anger or for any reason other than defending myself, I am causing harm, and it's abusive. Or if I go and I start going for the jugular, emotionally or mentally, like I'm just like, you're a fucking idiot, or you're stupid, or you're a disappointment, or something along those lines, that again is also going to set the experience up for creating a very unsafe space. And the same is true for like what I allow. If I allow someone to express their anger toward me in a way that is not healthy, that is abusive, I have to take responsibility, first of all, for allowing that. And I have to set boundaries. And those boundaries literally could mean that I say to that person, look, I can't be in a relationship with you anymore because you're not safe to be around. And I don't want to make myself unsafe just to be in a relationship with you. That's not healthy for me. And it's not healthy for you either. It's just enabling you to continue acting a certain way. So these are things that we really need to think about when it comes to handling our anger, handling other people's anger. I will be coming back to some of this topic in more depth, but the next video I'm going to share is going to ultimately be about what does it mean to feel safe, and I will talk about that soon with you. Thanks for watching. Take care. And if you found this video helpful, please subscribe, like the video, and click the notification bell.